With just 2 points separating the two leading crews in the Australian Rally Championship for 1987, the BP Visco Alpine Rally was once again to be the event to decide the winner. The Canberra crew of Greg Carr and Fred Gacentis in the Alfa Romeo GTV6 go into the final round of the championship with a 2-point lead over Sydney-siders Wayne Bell and Dave Body in their immaculately prepared Mazda 323 Turbo 4-wheel drive.
Well, I think I'll play it by ear, really. We're not going for an outright win. We're more concentrating on keeping ahead of Greg. So we'll be keeping an eye on what he does and just driving accordingly, I think. I'd really like to just run my own race, actually.
In just a few moments, the first of the 90 cars and crews taking part in this gruelling event will be flagged away from the start here at the Lake Hume Resort on the shores of the Hume Weir. And with no less than 11 4-wheel drive cars taking part, it's sure to be a hard-fought affair. Following the start at the Lake Hume Resort, the field moved on to the first competitive section at Mungabarina Reserve, just east of the city of Albury. Wayne Bell had the little turbo Mazda flying right from the very start and took fastest time through the section, followed closely behind by the crowd-pleasing antics of Jim Middleton in the big V8 Commodore, dousing navigator Dale Payne in the process. The unluckiest pair were Queenslanders Mark Roach and Mick Price in their Mazda, aptly numbered 13. Their event finished shortly after the start, when the car literally drowned in the deep Ford. From Mungabarina, the cars then ventured into the first of the forest stages, where Greg Carr immediately set a cracking pace, leaving the others to swallow his dust. Jim Middleton's big blue Commodore decided it was better to go through the corners backwards as he set off after the flying Alfa. In the meantime, Wayne Bell was having his problems in the Mazda when the car left the road, striking a bank, severely damaging the rear suspension. Following some quick work by Bell's service crew, the car was back on the road, but with brakes on only 3 wheels.
Yes, well, 3 brakes slows you down a little bit. Obviously, you can't brake as late for a corner. But the car itself, being 4-wheel drive, even though it's only got 3 brakes, it still stops reasonably well. The biggest problem I've got is that when we went to the 15-inch wheels, the gear ratio is all wrong, and I just can't get the power out of the corners. So it's not only the brakes that are slowing me down a little bit. The main aim now would be to get the car to the finish, make sure it does get to the finish, and thereby forcing Greg to finish as well. So.
In the meantime, Gosford driver Ian Hill in the turbocharged Subaru was slowly catching the leaders after damaging his car in an off-road excursion early in the event. Hill was starting to get the feel of the car after a poor record in earlier rounds this year. Greg Carr really had the Alfa wound up as the cars headed into Flagstaff Ridge, 2 kilometres south of the historic gold mining town of Beechworth. Because of the brake problems with the Mazda, Wayne Bell was slowly dropping back through the field. Carr arrived at the lunchtime service break at Myrtleford with a comfortable lead, leaving the service crew nothing to do but change the tyres. Carr appeared relieved to learn that Bell had lost time and was no longer looking a threat.
Up to that point, when he had his problem, I think we were 7 seconds ahead of him, so it was pretty close. I'd expect now that he'd be dropping, 4 or 5 seconds each stage to us. So, but the problem is we've still got to finish. We still can't have a major problem because, as I say, he's still running. So it's certainly not all over.
In second place at the service break was David Eadie, who, after consistent times in the Mazda 323, found himself only 27 seconds behind the flying Greg Carr as they moved into the second division of the event. In the narrow, winding and dusty roads of the Meriang Forest, Carr continued to dominate the event. At this stage, mechanical problems started to plague the field, including the hard-charging David Eadie in the Mazda 323, eventually forcing him out of the event. After having an almost dream run in the early stages of the second division, Greg Carr's Alpha also became the victim of the rough roads, forcing the service crew to do some makeshift repairs on the rear suspension. Following this afternoon's service break here at Lake Buffalo, the cars will then head off for two of the toughest sections of the event, finishing in the Meriang Forest. Just after the cars got into the longest stage of the BP Visco Alpine Rally, the heavens opened, causing drivers considerable concern as they battled torrential rain and hail. The hard-charging Greg Carr made a mockery of the laws of physics in his rear-wheel drive Alfa Romeo to extend his lead by more than 10 minutes at the end of the division. The four-wheel drive cars revelled in these conditions, although Ian Hill almost came to grief when lying in second place. After the demise of David Eadie, Ian Hill inherited second place to be over 4 minutes ahead of Wayne Bell, who was gradually working his way back into contention. South Australian pair Mark and David Tolcher in the turbocharged four-wheel drive Subaru continued their charge through the field, although a damaged front end caused the duo to slow down near the end of the stage. The service crew was forced to use a makeshift jack to repair the car and get it back on the road. Meanwhile, the Mazda RX-7 of Canberra driver John Waterhouse was looking a little worse for wear, with its front wheels wanting to go in opposite directions. Once again, the ingenuity of the service crews was brought to the fore, and the Mazda was soon back with a vengeance, rounding up fellow RX-7 pilot Reg Carter in the process. South Australian rally champion and school teacher Ed Odinski, with consistent driving, improved his placing to lie fourth at the end of the second division. Meanwhile, the antics of Jim Middleton in the big V8 Commodore thrilled the Commodore fans as the Sydney driver moved up into sixth place. With the mounting challenges coming from all directions, the pair of Greg Carr and Fred Gacentis were still not overly confident of success going into the nighttime stages east of Tallangatta near the Hume Weir. As the cars headed into the third division during the night around the pine forests near Kui Tong and Tallangatta, many of the backmarkers had already retired. Greg Carr was still holding a comfortable lead at the end of the first night stage. After a relatively trouble-free run, quietly spoken Gosford mechanic Ian Hill was trying to peg back the lead of Carr and Gacentis.
Pretty good. I think we're second at the moment. It's been going pretty good tonight, and haven't had any problems tonight.
No problems at all?
No, no worries.
Meanwhile, Mark Tolcher was still making his presence felt as he arrived at Kui Tong. Tolcher appeared to have no further problems since the broken front end in the second division.
We came up against the bank and bent a lower control arm as well as a tie rod and the steering as well, but we've replaced all that and things are going well. So the first stage tonight we put in fastest time compared to those in front, so I'm happy.
Looking forward to a good finish?
Yes, yes. Trying to improve on our ninth last year.
Jim Middleton in the Commodore was out to prove the sceptics wrong as he blasted around the pine plantations, maintaining his sixth position. Meanwhile, Wayne Bell was having trouble seeing the road.
Just the driving lights went out for some reason. I had to fix them up a bit hard of a night without any lights. So we fixed that. We dropped a few places on the road, but that's all.
Despite the cold conditions during the night, many hundreds of volunteers looked after the control points, although some had the luxury of a small fire to keep warm. Throughout the night, thousands of spectators lined the route, cheering their favourite drivers as they blasted through the blackness. A At the end of Division 3, the leader was Greg Carr by just over 9 minutes from Ian Hill, with the Tolcher brothers a further 9 minutes in arrears. After several hundred kilometres of gruelling night driving, the cars then headed back to the warmth and luxury of the Lake Hume Resort for a well-earned rest before tackling the final day. The cars were flagged away from the Lake Hume Resort for the final day in what has been described as one of the country's most gruelling and difficult motorsport events. Jim Middleton in the Holden Commodore obviously had a few tricks up his sleeve for the first stage, when the car appeared complete with BMW wheels. The first competitive stage was the old Hume Weir racing circuit, just a few kilometres from the start. Here the drivers were required to complete a standing and flying lap, with many competitors getting the cars sideways, much to the delight of the large crowds which had gathered at the circuit. Greg Carr and Fred Gacentis were obviously going all out to win the event, as well as aiming to wrap up the Australian Championship, with the Alfa Romeo really setting the pace around the very tight and tricky circuit. Next out was Ian Hill and Phil Bonzer in the Subaru, and although running without any major problems, the Japanese four-wheel drive was working hard as Hill put the car through its paces.
Very quiet.
The Tolcher brothers from South Australia were also pushing their Subaru to the limits in an effort to hang on to third place. South Australian rally champion and primary school teacher Ed Odinski was out to teach his rivals a lesson when he blasted his Subaru around the circuit. Lying third in the Australian Series in his first season, the current South Australian ace was out to consolidate his position. With still only 3 breaks to slow down the flying Mazda 323, Wayne Bell and Dave Boddy would desperately try to work their way back into contention, as well as finishing the event. Only 2 points behind Carr in the Australian Championship, Bell needed to finish in front of Carr to clinch the title. Next out was the super quick Commodore, driven by the jovial Jim Middleton, with Dale Payne in the passenger's seat. Middleton had worked his way up into 6th position, although the 5-litre V8 was certainly proving a handful on the tight Hume Weir circuit. With Greg Carr and Fred Gacentis playing the part of catch me if you can, the rest of the field was being left behind as the pair opened up an ever-increasing lead. Through the first stage of the Stanley Forest, Carr was leading Ian Hill's Subaru. Still in third position were the Tolcher brothers, and back in 4th place was Ed Odinski, determined to make it tough for those cars in front. Wayne Bell and Dave Boddy had driven with only 3 breaks almost from the start of the event, and by this time were getting used to the tiny flying 4-wheel drive Mazda. Middleton's Commodore was also making its presence felt as he continued to have a trouble-free run through the Stanley Forest, thrilling the crowds with his sideways driving. As the cars headed into special stage 28, the drama was about to unfold to the amazement and bewilderment of officials and spectators alike. wrested the lead from Greg Carr and Fred Gacentis. As the crowds and officials waited for Carr's flying Alpha, tension increased by the minute. The next car through was the turbocharged Subaru of Team Tolcher. It soon became obvious that something serious had happened to 5 times winner of the Alpine Rally, Greg Carr, when Wayne Bell appeared in the Mazda, leaving those behind in his dust. Odinski and Middleton were next through, and by this time, Greg Carr's service crew were getting worried. After making radio contact, Carr's crew finally located the mortally wounded Alpha high up in the Stanley Forest, just a short distance from the start of the special stage. The left-hand front suspension on the Alfa Romeo GTV6 had collapsed, and while the service crew worked feverishly to repair the damage, Carr and Gacentis stood by, slowly watching the Alpine Rally and the Australian Championship slip from their grasp. Carr's service crew worked non-stop to get the Alpha back on the road as Carr and Gacentis watched the precious seconds tick past. After having the broken suspension replaced in 12 minutes, Carr couldn't wait to get going.
We just started the stage and it was a really smooth road compared to what we've been on. We're just driving along and I heard this like a shotgun shot, and obviously one of the bolts is broken in the top suspension mount.
Is this the end of the event for you?
Well, we're still in it at the moment. We've got to get through this stage and another one before our late time runs out. So we haven't got any brakes, just a handbrake, so that's a bit sloppy. So we'll just do the best we can and see what happens.
Get a shot of him go. Shot of the car loading.
No brakes, Vic, don't forget. No brakes.
Because Carr was almost out of late running time, the mechanics decided to leave the brakes off the car until the first available service break, which was a further 40 kilometres along the stage. With no brakes, Carr managed to complete the stage without further incident, although it appeared he had relinquished the 9-minute lead in the Alpine Rally. Ian Hill and schoolteacher navigator Phil Bonzer had taken over the lead from Carr by 2 minutes and 7 seconds. Limping into the service point, Carr was holding on to second place by 4.5 minutes from the Team Tolcher Subaru. Carr's service crew quickly fitted front brakes to the Alpha, and the public servant from Canberra was ready to go again. Meanwhile, Wayne Bell was hoping for a miracle after hearing about Carr's misfortune.
Yes, I don't really know how much time he's lost or what's happened exactly, or even if he's still in late time, so I'm not sure there. But like I said early on in the piece, this rally's not over until it's finished, so I'm not counting anything yet. I think Greg's probably still going, and as you know, we only have 3-wheel brakes ourselves, so we're not actually setting the world on fire section time-wise. But we just have to wait till the finish and see what happens. That's the way this event is.
With the event almost over, Carr needed to finish in front of Bell to win the Australian Rally Championship, while Hill needed to finish in front of Carr to win his second Alpine. This time it was back to the Hugh Weir circuit for the second time in less than 6 hours. This was to be the final competitive stage in the prestigious event. While it was the Group A cars that were providing the interest in the event, it was the Group G modified specials that were providing the action on the old racing circuit. From the Hugh Weir circuit, the cars returned to the Lake Hume Resort, with Ian Hill and Phil Bonzer claiming victory in the 1987 BP Visco Alpine Rally.
Yes, I'm very excited. It's the second Alpine I've won. It really is the hardest event all year to win, and it's the most prestigious event in Australia, and it has the longest tradition in rallying, and you know, I'm just absolutely rapt to win this event twice.
Navigator Phil Bonzer was elated after the win.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, we haven't had a very good year at all. We would have been pleased to just finish. Winning is fabulous.
After the event, Greg Carr was crowned Australian Rally Champion for the second time in his career, whilst navigator Fred Gacentis won his first Australian title.
We came here with the aim of trying to win the Australian Championship, which we've done. Winning the event would have been nice for sure, but that was certainly secondary.
You can't crack it for 6 times.
Oh, I don't know. I don't think it's possible.